evening. It's Wednesday, 23rd of April, and here's what's making news around the world on World News tonight. Pope's funeral. Pope Francis to be laid to rest on Saturday in historic Vatican funeral. Australia earthquake. 4.6 magnitude quake shakes New South Wales. No major damage reported. NYC pop-up. Lorde surprises fans with NYC pop-up after police shut down launch event.
From Colombo, this is World News Tonight with Prashansa Gunawardana.
Good evening once again. The Vatican has announced that Pope Francis's funeral will take place this Saturday in St. Peter's Square, drawing global leaders and mourners to honor the first Latin American pontiff's enduring legacy.
It's an image that will go down in history. Pope Francis lying in an open coffin in his red papal vestments. He's wearing his pointed papal mitre, and his rosary is wound twice around his hands. 2 Swiss guards stand at attention beside the coffin. A somber ritual was performed last night in a small chapel, and today the Vatican is revealing the Pope's final words. Before setting out on his surprise appearance in the Pope-mobile on Easter Sunday, he asked an aide, "Do you think I can manage it?" When his circuit around St. Peter's Square was over, he said, "Thank you for bringing me back to the square." The Vatican says in a statement he was tired but content. Tomorrow, the Pope will be taken to St. Peter's and will lie in state for 3 days, so thousands may pay their respects. The atmosphere in Vatican City is not only grief, but also gratitude. President Trump, accompanied by First Lady Melania, will be among the many heads of state attending despite a history of tension between them. In 2016, Pope Francis suggested during a trip to Mexico that Trump is not a Christian. Trump was outraged.
For a religious leader to question a person's faith is disgraceful.
Cardinals from all over the world have begun arriving for the funeral and the conclave that will choose a new pope. Experts say that informal discussions are already underway among cardinals in quiet corners of the Vatican.
Catholics worldwide are mourning the death of Pope Francis, with his body lying in state at St. Peter's Basilica ahead of Saturday's funeral, as tributes pour in for the transformative leader.
The rituals of a papal passing. The Vatican's flags have been lowered to half-mast, the doors of St. Peter's Basilica half closed, as 9 days of official mourning begins. Inside, as tradition dictates, the Pope's formal living quarters have been sealed, just hours after his death from a stroke and irreversible heart failure. Pope Francis had appeared frail following his discharge from hospital in March. He'd spent more than a month there, being treated for double pneumonia, but he delighted crowds with an appearance on Easter Sunday.
Buona Pasqua.
The Pope was born in 1936 in Argentina. Today they worshipped him there as a man of the people.
The Pope of everyone has died. The Pope of all humanity, who insisted 1 and 1,000 times that there must be room for everyone.
Francis's views on social justice saw him dismissed by Argentina's president, Javier Milei, as an embarrassing communist. In response to his death, President Milei said, despite differences, knowing his kindness and wisdom was an honour. The US president also clashed with Pope Francis over their differing views on immigration. But Donald Trump, who says he'll attend the funeral, ordered flags be flown at half-mast in tribute to the late pontiff.
He was a good man, worked hard. He loved the world, and it's an honour to do that.
King Charles expressed his condolences, saying our heavy hearts have been somewhat eased, knowing the Pope was able to share an Easter greeting. Vladimir Putin said,
"This is a man who treated Russia in an extremely positive manner. I can say that for sure, and we will remember this."
The Pope used his final address to again call for peace in Gaza. Since war broke out, he spoke every day to a Catholic priest in the embattled territory. And today he was remembered by Palestinians.
Dozens of tourists have been killed after gunmen opened fire at a popular resort in Indian-administered Kashmir, marking one of the region's deadliest attacks in years and raising new security concerns amid renewed tensions in the troubled area.
An attack much larger than anything we've seen directed at civilians in recent years, says Omar Abdullah, Chief Minister of the Jammu and Kashmir Federal Territory. After a group of gunmen opened fire on tourists, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has condemned the attack.
Condolences to those who have lost their loved ones. I pray that the injured recover at the earliest. All possible assistance is being provided to those affected. Those behind this heinous act will be brought to justice. They will not be spared. Their evil agenda will never succeed. Our resolve to fight terrorism is unshakable, and it will get even stronger.
The little-known Kashmir resistance militant group have claimed the attack. Their victims, tourists visiting the scenic Baisaran meadow just down the road from the resort town of Pahalgram. The majority Muslim Kashmir Valley is administered partly by India and partly by Pakistan, a disputed region along a crude religious border Britain drew during decolonisation, separating majority Muslim Pakistan and majority Hindu India. The Indian-held part has been the theatre of insurgency against New Delhi rule since 1989. Violence in recent years has mostly spared tourists, but attacks have continued. And since the region's semi-autonomous status was withdrawn in 2019, 84,000 non-locals from elsewhere in India have moved in, something separatist militants say is driving demographic change in the region.
China has issued a stern warning to nations considering trade agreements with the US, cautioning against deals that could undermine Chinese interest amid escalating tariff tensions.
China is ramping up its warning as its trade war with the United States intensifies, accusing Washington of abusing tariffs and pressuring countries into deals that could damage Beijing's economic interests. The latest comments from China's Commerce Ministry came in response to reports that US plans to demand tariff concessions from its allies only if they agree to limit trade with China, Beijing vowing to respond resolutely and reciprocally. Since the Trump administration raised tariff on Chinese imports to a staggering 145%, Beijing has retaliated with 125 duties on US goods, effectively erecting two-way trade barriers between the world's biggest economies. Markets have grown wary. While Chinese stocks showed a little immediate reaction, the risks of a broader slowdown are looming large. Analysts warn that tariff wars could derail global growth and push trade-reliant nations closer to recession. Caught in the crossfire, Southeast Asia, countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, heavily tied to both Beijing and Washington, are now facing new US tariffs between 32% and 49%. Trade ministers from the region are in Washington this week, trying to strike new bilateral deals before damage deepens. President Xi Jinping, fresh from visits across the region, is rallying support. He's calling on global partners to resist economic bullying and pledging to tear down walls, expanding China's trading circle beyond Washington's reach. And in a new twist, China is taking its case to the global stage, calling a United Nations meeting to condemn the US for casting a shadow over peace and deployment by weaponizing tariffs. With semiconductor restrictions, AI chip export bans, and retaliatory sanctions stacking up, the tariff war is turning into a test of economic endurance, one with no clear winner in sight.
Singapore has officially finalized its candidates for the May 3rd general election, with the ruling People's Action Party introducing 32 fresh faces, marking its biggest ever renewal under Prime Minister Lawrence Wong's promise of new ideas and leadership energy.
Singapore is gearing up for its general election on May 3rd, and this time changes in the air. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, who took office last year, is leading the ruling People's Action Party into its biggest refresh since Singapore gained independence in 1965, introducing 32 new candidates in a bid to inject new blood, new ideas and new energy. That's more than either of his predecessors managed in their first elections, signaling that Wong is making his leadership style distinctly his own. but the election won't just be a test of its popularity. Singapore's trade-reliant economy is under pressure, hit by downgraded growth forecast, fears of recession, and fallout from US tariffs under President Donald Trump. For Singapore's 2.76 million registered voters, the top issues this election are closer to home: rising living cost, job security, and the country's economic future. The PAP is contesting all but 5 seats, with one walkover win already in hand. Opposition parties, especially the Workers' Party, are fielding fewer candidates than expected, just 26 after a surprise withdrawal in one key constituency. Several political heavyweights are stepping down, including longtime Defence Minister and Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean, signalling a major generational shift inside the ruling party. In February, Wong unveiled what analysts called an election budget, offering tax rebates, cash handouts, and food vouchers. But he's warning voters not to be swayed by opposition promises he says could weaken public finances. For Prime Minister Wong, this ballot is more than a mandate, it's a referendum on whether his new vision for Singapore can hold steady in a rapidly shifting world.
South Korea and the United States are commencing high-level trade discussions in Washington, focusing on resolving auto tariff issues and strengthening economic cooperation.
South Korea's Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok has arrived in Washington, D.C. for trade talks with the U.S. The discussions are set to begin at 8 a.m. local time on Thursday. This marks the highest-level visit by a South Korean official since the start of the Trump administration's second term.
We are here to initiate discussions that will further strengthen the South Korea-US alliance. I will share the results of our talks on Thursday.
Choi's visit comes amid rising trade tensions, with the U.S. imposing a 25% tariff on South Korean imports. Minister Choi is joined by Trade Minister An Deok-keun, who will arrive on Wednesday to join the discussions with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. While the specifics of the meeting remain unclear, the talks are expected to address a broad range of issues, including the ongoing trade imbalance, potential non-tariff barriers like U.S. beef import restrictions, and even defense cost-sharing. The Trump administration has been accelerating its trade efforts, with the White House announcing that the entire trade team is meeting with officials from 34 countries this week alone.
We are moving at Trump speed to ensure these deals are made on behalf of the American worker and the American people.
Experts in Seoul advise South Korea to take a measured approach for a better long-term deal.
We don't know if what Trump wants today, it'll be the same tomorrow. He may ask additional things in the near future. We want to make sure that if there is a deal, then it's a complete deal.
The expert also cautioned that the U.S. may be seeking a quick win for President Trump, which could lead to rushed decisions. With so much on the line in these negotiations, the outcome of Thursday's talks is being closely watched.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. A 4.6 magnitude earthquake struck near Singleton in New South Wales early this morning, shaking buildings across the region. No injuries have been reported, but aftershocks are anticipated.
It's 3 a.m. and as the hunter sleeps, the earth has other ideas. A 4.6 magnitude tremor rocking houses, stores and campers, it broke.
It felt like a heap of people were shaking the motorhome, and then I thought the boys were roughhousing.
I was worried that the river had come up and I was being washed away. Rocking and rolling in the swag, I grabbed hold of my son and I just laid there like, oh my God, what's going on?
More than 4,000 people reported the quake to Geoscience Australia. It struck near Broke. And there was a 2.7 magnitude aftershock at 2:57 p.m. at nearby Jerry's Plains. These latest seismic seismic events raising more questions about the coalition's plan to build a nuclear power plant at the site of the former Lorde power station.
Harvard University has launched legal action against the US government, seeking to overturn a $3.4 billion federal funding freeze linked to recent policy disputes, calling the move politically motivated and detrimental to academic independence and research continuity.
Tonight, a high-stakes battle is unfolding between one of America's most prestigious academic institutions and the Trump administration, as Harvard University sues the federal government on what it calls an unconstitutional freeze of $2 billion in vital research funding. Harvard President Alan Garber, in a letter to the university community, announced the lawsuit, calling the funding freeze an overreach that could cripple critical research on diseases like pediatric cancer, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's. He argued the move threatens not only medical progress but also academic freedom. The lawsuit claims the Trump administration is using federal funding as leverage to exert control over Harvard's curriculum, hiring, and admissions processes, amounting to a takeover attempt under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism and enforcing diversity standards. The White House was swift to respond, saying the so-called gravy train of federal assistance to elite schools is ending, arguing that taxpayer money should not support what they call overpaid bureaucrats and political agendas. This is part of a broader crackdown with similar funding freezes hitting Ivy League peers like Cornell, Brown, and Columbia, some of whom have agreed federal oversight following threats to cut hundreds of millions in support. Harvard, however, has dug its heels, releasing a sharply worded rejection of government's demands. President Garber, who is Jewish, acknowledged the school's struggles with anti-Semitism, but noted the university has launched internal task forces to address anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim bias. The legal standoff also carries political weight, with former President Barack Obama voicing support for Harvard and calling the Trump administration's actions unlawful.
Qatar and Egypt have presented Hamas with a new ceasefire proposal, aiming for a multi-year truce that includes the release of hostages and a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza.
Over in the Middle East, Qatar and Egypt have proposed a long-term truce to end the war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas. Citing a Palestinian Arab official, the BBC says the two mediators suggested a ceasefire that includes a 5 to 7 year pause in fighting, the release of all hostages in return for Palestinian Arab prisoners in Israeli jails, as well as a complete withdrawal of Israel from Gaza. The official also reportedly told the BBC that Hamas is ready to hand over the governance of Gaza to, quote, any Palestinian entity agreed upon at the national and regional level.
Russian missile strikes have battered multiple Ukrainian cities in recent days, even as Kremlin officials signal that meaningful peace negotiations remain distant, reinforcing fears of prolonged conflict in the region and worsening humanitarian conditions on the ground.
Kyiv is ramping up its diplomatic efforts to end its war with Russia. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said his country is ready for an unconditional ceasefire if Moscow halts all its attacks. He added that in this case, Ukraine would be ready to hold talks with Russia.
After the ceasefire, we are ready to sit down in any format so that there's no deadlock. Because at that point, we'll believe that we have achieved at least some kind of result.
The country is under pressure both on the battlefield and in the political ring. Ukrainian troops are outmaneuvered and outgunned, and the Trump administration is becoming increasingly impatient. Zelensky's comments come ahead of a meeting in London on Wednesday, with Ukraine and its European allies meeting top US officials to discuss possible peace deals. This includes a US proposal to formally recognise Crimea as part of Russia, along with the easing of sanctions. This is unlikely to sit well with Kyiv.
Ukraine does not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. There's nothing to talk about. This is beyond our constitution. It's our territory, the territory of the people of Ukraine.
US recognition of Crimea as Russian would be a difficult pill to swallow. It was Moscow's illegal annexation of the territory in 2014 that opened the door to further aggression and Russia's full-scale invasion. Europe is expected to press Ukraine's case and get security guarantees, along with restructuring programs partly paid for by frozen Russian assets. But while talks take place around negotiating tables, the human cost of war is still being felt. Russian drone strikes in Odessa, Kharkiv and Zaporizhia killed one person and injured several more. Many in Ukraine fear the bloodshed and sacrifice will be in vain, and the winner in a US-brokered settlement would be Vladimir Putin.
Let's take a short commercial break. More world news coming after this. Welcome back. Singer Lorde treated fans to a surprise performance in New York City, debuting her new single at an impromptu pop-up after police shut down an earlier event, turning a disrupted launch into a raw, intimate musical moment.
In true Lorde fashion, the Queen of the Unexpected made waves once again, this time with a pop-up performance that nearly didn't happen. Fans swarmed the New York City's Washington Square Park after the New Zealand singer teased a surprise concert with just a cryptic post. The crowd gathered early, some even climbing trees for a better view of the elusive artist. But just minutes before showtime, chaos hit. Lorde took to social media to announce that police were shutting down the event, apologizing the hundreds who showed up. In a twist, the show went on. Lorde took the stage for an intimate impromptu debut of a brand new single, What Was That?, her first solo release since 2021's Solar Power. Fans believed it could mark the beginning of her next album era. This surprise return comes after her recent collab with Charli XCX after nearly 3 years of musical silence. Now, with a one haunting chorus and a pop-up park gig, Lorde is back, mysterious, bold and dripping with nostalgia.
2 orphan bear cubs rescued in Turkey are winning hearts at a wildlife shelter, delighting caregivers and visitors alike with their playful charm and symbolizing a small moment of joy and hope in the world of conservation.
Cute baby animal alert. 2 orphan bear cubs are charming everyone who makes eye contact with them at their animal shelter home. The little ones live in the western Turkish city of Bursa, at a wildlife center where they were brought after being found abandoned. They were given names meaning rain and cloud, though their lives now are anything but stormy. The adorable pair roam the halls under the watchful eye of a veterinary team and get frequent checkups. Rain and Cloud are also receiving a special diet to ensure they grow up to be big bears. That means they get fed 6 times a day with treats including lactose-free milk, kefir, honey, eggs, and cream. Not to mention multivitamins. When the wee ursines get bigger, they'll join the other bears at the center. Some 75 brown bears live there, all of whom are unable to live in the wild. All things considered, it's a pretty good way to pass the time being a bear.
Well, that's a wrap from all of us here at World News Tonight. Up next, Anuradhi Wickramasinghe is standing by for the nightly business report. I'm Prashansa Gunawardana. We leave you now with stunning visuals of courageous penguins, part of a new wildlife series for Earth Day. Thank you for having us and have a good night.